and welcome back. In today's video, we're checking out a brand new drum set from the folks at Beatello. Now, if you haven't heard of Beatello, I don't blame you. They seem to be a very new company on the market, but I've seen their stuff coming up on social media a little bit here and there, and so I'm excited to get my hands on these and try them in person. Now, Beatello reached out to me a couple weeks ago and thought that I would enjoy checking out this kit, which isn't the first thing on their website that caught my eye, but I do find this setup very unique and cool, and it comes in at just under $400, which is pretty mind-blowing for 5 drums and then the hardware that comes with the set. Now, I got this set earlier in the week and unboxed it in the other room, got it set up, and what I will say is the process of getting this kit and putting it together was really easy. Usually when you get a drum set, you've got to take off some heads and get some stuff out of one of the drum shells as it comes nested together. But since these toms are single-headed and the other drums are so small, it actually all fit into the box, mostly assembled. So, what are you going to get with this kit? You're going to get a 14 by 14 inch bass drum, along with a riser and a bass drum pedal, 10, 12, and 14 inch single-headed toms, a 12 by 2.5 inch depth snare drum, and then you're also going to get a hi-hat stand, a snare stand, and a cymbal stand, along with all the various mounts and arms you would need to set it up as you see here today. What you do not get with this kit is a drum throne or cymbals, so if you're buying this with the hope that you can put your first drum set together or something together for a practice space, you will need to consider adding those in and the cost of getting a hi-hat and maybe a crash ride and a seat, of course. Now, when I first got these drums set up, I played them a little bit and they mostly sounded good to go. I really like the sound of the toms, especially for being single-headed drums that don't even really have a traditional drum shell. They just have this sleeve that has a bearing edge at the top so you can stretch the head over, and then it has your standard triple flanged hoop, which can secure to that sleeve so you can get tension and stretch that head. They sound pretty good in my opinion, and they have a cool, slappy, dry, dead tone, especially when they're tuned lower, which I think is helped by the fact that they have these rings here on the bottom side of the head that are much like you'd see on most bass drum heads, where it has like a muffling ring. I really like this sound. I know it's not for everybody, and if you've only played on traditional toms that are double-headed and have, some depth to the shells, these probably sound pretty foreign to you, and I think that's cool. They're different than most drum sets, and I think that sets this kit apart and hopefully makes it appealing to more people. The snare drum is the most standard piece of equipment that comes with this kit. It's double-headed like most snare drums you have. So on the top here, we've got a coated Beatello Subwoofer King durable Emperor head. On the bottom, we've got your standard resonant head, which is super thin, snare wires, and it's double lugged. So it's kind of got this cool look to it where we have a lug for the top head and then offset are the lugs for the bottom head. This whole drum set comes in this like flat black finish, and the finish here on this snare drum is a wrap, but it has like a grainy texture to it, which I think looks really sharp, along with this like powder coated black hardware, which I think looks really slick. The one thing that disappointed me with this snare drum is the throw off is pretty junky. It's nothing special, and it's also chrome, which is a little bit of a bummer because all the other hardware fittings and like mounts for the toms, they were able to give that like powder coated black finish. So I wish they could have done that with the snare throw off, but for under $400, it's hard to complain. Let me go ahead and play the snare drum for you quick. It's certainly different than most standard issue snare drums you're gonna see with drum sets. It's 12 inches in diameter and it's like 2.5 or 3 inches in depth, I think. I'll put up the number on screen if I'm wrong. I like the uniqueness of this and the fact that it's different than what I would encounter on most other drum sets and makes this kit stand apart. Now, the last drum on this kit that's included is a 14 by 14 inch bass drum, which is probably the smallest bass drum I've ever played. Most kits that you get as a beginner come with a standard issue 22 inch bass drum, usually 18 inches deep, maybe 16. And then if your taste are more specific to jazz or lighter styles, you might use a 20 or an 18 inch bass drum. But over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more 16 inch bass drums with like portable traveling kits, like the Ludwig Breakbeats or some of the other sets out there. 14 is very unique. I think I've seen like a Sonar Martini kit that had a 14 inch bass drum, but I don't see any other company offering 14 inch kicks unless it would be like a youth child-sized drum set. Now, when I first played this one out of the box, it sounded like a floor tom, which is the exact size that it is. But I went ahead and threw one little hand towel in the drum, and then I added a kick patch to the batter head, and that helped a lot. And that's because it has heads similar to the toms that have like muffling rings on them. At least for the batter side, the Rezo is just a non-coated white head single ply, I think. Now, I don't know if you could see this, but when I played with my heel up with a little bit more intensity, the drums bounced around a little bit. I'll show you here. You can see the toms moving. I don't know if there's anything I could do with the setup to make that settle down a little bit. I think it's just the fact that this bass drum is pretty small and I'm using a lot of force, so there's gonna be some motion with it. If I play heel down, you can still see a little bit of vibration with the toms, but it's not that bad. One of the things that disappointed me with the bass drum is when you fold the spurs out, there's no sort of height adjustment, which means you can't change the angle of the drum other than using the back plate here that attaches to the pedal. I think when you factor in the price, it's hard to have a complaint about that. And this setup works fine for me, at least the way I have it right now. If I switch to another pedal, maybe I'd have an issue, but they include a bass drum pedal with it and it all works, so I'm not gonna throw a fit. Overall, I haven't had much issues with the hardware. It's pretty lightweight, but it does have some double braced components, which is nice to see. The bass drum pedal has 2 chains and it has a nice spring adjustment, so you can really dial it into your liking. The hi-hat stand was probably my least favorite part about the hardware. It just doesn't have a ton of action for the motion if you're gonna look for the chick sound, especially if you play a style like jazz. The cymbal stand, it works great. I'm not very particular about cymbal stands, and in fact, I like when they're lightweight because it's easier to carry around in my hardware bag. The last piece here, the snare stand, again, holds the drum up fine, works great. I think it would work for some other size snare drums, like at least a 13. But what I will say is it only goes so high, and with this piccolo depth snare drum, this is about as high as I could get it, and ideally I would probably like it another like 2 to 3 inches higher. So that's a little bit of a disappointment, but I think this whole setup would work really well for someone with a more low profile drum kit. After getting to play on this for a few days, I think my first impressions are that it's a really good value for what you're getting, and I think the tone of the drums is pretty nice. On Beatello's site, it kind of lists this in their description as like for the drummer who doesn't want to compromise, and I think that's the totally wrong angle to take. Obviously, this drum set has some compromises on it. I mean, the toms don't have shells, the snare drum is a smaller diameter than you're used to in piccolo, and the bass drum is much smaller. I think this drum set is for the drummer who wants to make compromises to factors of their kit, but still get an interesting and quality tone. To me, the bass drum sounds good. It doesn't sound like my 22-inch rock drum, but it does something well, and I think could work for some pickup gigs I have on a patio or busking in the street. I think the toms are not very versatile in terms of tone and resonance, but they have a cool slap to them, and I could totally see myself pulling these out for tracking in the studio where I want that dry concert tom sound. And also, when it comes to the snare drum, I think it's unique and different, and even if I wasn't to use it in this kit, I could see myself putting this off to the side of my drum set for a side snare because it's different than most of the other snare drums I own. What I really love about this set is that all the components are really interesting and unique, even if I wouldn't use them together with this exact setup of these 5 drums. So I think this would be a fun kit to add to your collection if maybe you have a more standard rock or jazz setup and want something that's totally different with some flexibility for mixing and matching with other drums you own. Once again, thank you to Beatello for sending me this kit to try out and play. I'm having a blast with it, and I hope that it could be useful for some of you out there that have only been able to see the listing photos on their website and want to see someone actually playing this and making some music with it. I'd love to hear what you guys think, so leave a comment down below and let me know. And until next time, thanks.